Ooh. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, I've been listening to you for about a decade. And one of the things I keep thinking as I go along, and I listen to you a lot, is I always wanted to be able to connect directly to Source the way Esther does.
Yeah.
So,
that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah, I would really like to do that.
Everyone, each of you, is an extension.
So after about 10 years of listening to you, I finally, like a week ago, I believed in and I recognized that what I was doing. And so my wife actually triggered the knowledge of it. She said, unconditional self-love. And all of a sudden I go, whoop. It went in between the cracks, and I swear I tapped in to Source energy, and I got my answers. I realized I was believing along a little bit here and there.
You do it all the time. You all do it all the time.
But I knew I did it that time.
That is the point. That is the point. So you're giving us an opportunity to say something we really want to say. And that is, that's the wonderfulness of deliberate intention. When you are clear about what you want, and then it happens, you make the connection. If you're not tending to your intentions, another thing that's important to acknowledge is that there's a space usually of time between the step 1 asking and the step 3 allowing, and that's what makes people often not recognize that the very thing that they ask for came.
So I guess my question is, I could probably, how does Esther string that out for 3 hours? Because I did it, I recognized it for 5 seconds, right? It wasn't even 5 seconds, and I knew I had done it in little bits and pieces. But I really appreciate the length of time she can hold that vibration. It's crazy.
She had the advantage. She didn't have a lot of things going on. She wasn't rigid in opinions or attitudes or beliefs. She was raised in an environment where she was allowed to think, and she was not force-fed anything. So she was a sort of allowing person to begin with. And then she had the wonderful experience of being with Jerry when this all came about, who had so many questions and such appreciation and expectation of what Esther was receiving. And so they spent a lot of time in those early days and weeks and months and years in conversation. It was his asking and her willingness to allow.
Right.
And so it could be helpful. You say your wife triggered something.
Yeah, she's very helpful in this situation. I see her do it sometimes too, where she will bleep in for a second, and it's like my mouth just takes over and just spits things out perfectly articulate. And it's really, and it's only, it feels like, it's hard to explain.
It's hard to explain, but you know it when it happens. So let's talk about what the elements of it are. So if you have something that you want to know, it's good for us right now to acknowledge that a question, the vibration of a question and the vibration of the answer are two different frequencies. Because the question is full of where is it? Why isn't it? What is it? Where the answer doesn't have any of that resistance in it. Just like a problem is a different frequency than a solution. So if you are the one asking and you're all wadded up in the question or the problem, then you're not in the receptive mode. So that's why it's helpful to have somebody else with the question while you've meditated yourself into a clear mind. And that's what Jerry and Esther did every time. They meditated, Esther cleared her mind, then he got out his questions and he asked. It's what happens in a forum like this. Esther has been readying herself, wanting to make sure that her mind is clear. Nothing is more upsetting to her than for someone to bring her a problem the day of or even the day before a gathering like this, because she doesn't want her mind pushing against all kinds of things. In other words, you have to decide that You want to feel good. And those who are up close to Esther know that she has her moments. She's not always in the state of alignment. Don't say anything to anyone, any of you. But when it matters, she can focus herself into alignment, and anyone can.
Right. That's where I have to work on that.
And so, can you hear what's going on here? There's some taking score. There's some what isness. Even your question has within it, well, it's not working out quite as well for me as it is for Esther, and I'd like to and that just adds to the resistance. And can you hear our answers? Our answers are saying to you, there's no reason for the resistance, but it's okay that there is resistance, and in time there won't be resistance, and sometimes.
So another question is, after I realized what I had done and I tapped in, you always say tapped in, tuned on, turned in, whatever.
Tapped in, tuned in, turned on.
Yes, okay. The future seems so much more moldable now, and the past seems more moldable too. It was like an interesting week.
That's because things are only as you perceive them to be.
Right, so you change your perception.
And your point of attraction.
Right.
Your point of attraction of your thoughts, your point of attraction of your memory. Let's talk about how the past has changed. The past was full of all kinds of elements, all kinds of components, and it was whatever it was for you. But when you tune into non-physical, when you tune into your inner being, now you are blended with your inner being who is remembering or reviewing your past. Your inner being doesn't look back, but in this active now where you're asking for that, reviewing your past from that perspective. And so the negative aspects that you were focused upon at that time are not what your inner being is focused upon.
Right.
Now you've hit upon brilliant you, receiving you. You've hit upon exactly what it is that takes you out of that alignment. When you focus upon a facet of something where your conscious human mind is more resistant, is a stronger, more resistant subject, it's harder for you to maintain your alignment. That's why we always say start with easy things. Start with things that you don't have big wads of resistance about, and you'll come to trust yourself more.
So when you say align with your inner being, that's what Esther does, right? She aligns.
She aligns with Abraham, who 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 aligns with Abraham. In other words, there is no ending to this string of infinite intelligence that is non-resistant and willing to talk to you all about whatever it is you want to talk about. And Esther's only work is to not be in the way by focusing on something that keeps her from receiving.
Right. That's
Same
awesome.
for you. Same for all of you.
Right.
Esther's an example of deliberate alignment. So here are the things. Be nice to yourself. Be easy about it. Start with things that are easier. Acknowledge when it is happening. Spend no time thinking about when it isn't.
That's where I get messed up.
Well, isn't that true of almost every subject? But just cut it out.
All right.
And you'll enjoy it more and more and more and more and more and more and more as it goes. Esther had this wonderful attraction of Jerry. It's like Jerry's step 1, he's asking. We're step 2, Abraham, we're answering. And Esther step 3, she's letting it in. And it made for a very nice mix, you see. But you can do it even as you are an individual, because you can step into step 1 and then chill out, get yourself into a place of meditation and receive your answers.
Okay.
You know what happens? We're just going to give this to you in a really strong way, because it happens to everyone. It happens to Esther sometimes too. If you can get past preferring to be right than to feel good, you'll click into this so much faster, because sometimes you'll have a problem and you know you're right about your perception of this problem. You know when it happened, you know who's involved, you know whose fault it is, and you know. So then when you ask for solutions, sometimes you don't let the solutions in because you'd rather be right than feel good.
Yep.
And so it's helpful for a little while you're really deliberate about establishing this conscious connection with your own inner being. Do not care so much what anybody else thinks about it. Esther made Jerry promise he wouldn't tell anyone about this. And for a long time he kept his promise to her, because she didn't want anybody to know what a freaky thing was going on. So you have to leave the peanut gallery out of the equation and just let your relationship with your inner being be what matters in regards to all things, not just that.
I flip-flop on that a bit.
Good. Really good.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.